Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are just going to give other attendees a moment to sign on, and we'll be starting in just a minute or so. Thanks.
Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jared Cohen, and I'm the president and CEO of the Parkinson Foundation of the National Capital Area. We also, of course, go by PFNCA. We're thrilled to partner with the Kensington Reston on a new PFNCA Communication Club program, which will start next week. Today, we are joined by Dr. Kodran Lungu of the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Lungu is also a member of the PFNCA Medical Advisory Board, and he will provide a brief overview of Parkinson's disease, discuss some recent developments, and he'll also kindly answer, we're thrilled to answer your questions as well. We'll also be joined by Susan Ronick, a speech language pathologist, who will serve as a facilitator for the new weekly PFNCA Communication Club program that will take place online. Later in our program, Dr. Lungu will answer your questions. He will answer as many as he can in the time we have allotted. To ask a question, simply use the chat feature in Zoom. You can do so by hovering over your Zoom screen and noticing the chat button on the Zoom toolbar. You don't need to wait for Dr. Lungu to finish his presentation before you ask questions, so you can even start submitting your questions at any time when you'd like to. Before we hear from Dr. Lungu, I'd like to introduce Angela Bailey, the Executive Director of the Kensington Reston. Angela.
Thank you, Jared, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon. My name is Angela Bailey, and I am honored to be the Executive Director opening the Kensington Reston, a new, beautiful community in Northern Virginia. I would like to echo what Jared said. We are thrilled to partner with PFNCA to bring a new communication club to Reston. The Kensington Reston is an assisted living and memory care community opening in Reston in early 2021. Whenever the Kensington enters a community, it's our priority to be a strong resource to the greater community, in addition to providing our residents the highest quality of care and programs. We're able to enact these programs and spread our reach through partnerships just like this one with PFNCA. I hope that you'll join us for our weekly communication club and that you'll come by and visit us in Reston. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kodran Lungu of the National Institutes of Health.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy taking part in our activities and talking to our wonderful Parkinson community. Thank you to PFNCA for giving us this opportunity to help and reach out and connect with our community. I will give a few brief updates. Just pausing to ask for a confirmation that my screen is visible. Yes? Okay, good. I see nods. So I will give a few updates on Parkinson's. This is obviously a huge topic, so I never think that it would be efficient to try to cover too much. So I will focus instead, particularly given what we will hear about later, on some of the non-motor symptoms, the burden of non-motors, and a little bit of what I think is a fortunate change in the focus and the way we think about care for Parkinson's disease in the last few years. And I will present studies that are ongoing or upcoming that I think our community might find of interest, as well as very briefly some updates on where the direction of treatment in Parkinson's is heading overall. I'm just wondering if my slides are moving by themselves or because I just saw it move. So I can advance them or someone else can, up to you. Okay, let's continue now. As Jared mentioned, I am a program director in the Division of Clinical Research at NINDS. I have met a lot of you in my previous role as the director of the Parkinson's Clinic in the intramural portion of NINDS, and I am a Parkinson's doctor by background. I still participate in the intramural clinic on occasion, and I'm still meeting some of our patients there. Important to remember that while I will summarize some of the relevant information in Parkinson's disease, please remember that I am speaking using my own opinions and views and my own experience. This isn't the official position of my government agency. And very importantly, I always like to remind our community that anything you hear in a lecture might sound great, but if it conflicts with advice you get from your Parkinson doctor, please take the latter over what you hear in a lecture from us, because they know you and your care best. So I would like to start with essentially a notice or a reminder that we have thought to some extent how we think about Parkinson's. The central features remain the same. This is a drawing from this book, and a lot of us know now this is the book written about Parkinson's by Dr. James Parkinson, who gave the disease the name in 1817. An interesting comprehensive description that we still go back to. However, even though Parkinson himself described the disease as affecting multiple systems and multiple parts of the body, for some reason, for decades after, we tended to view Parkinson primarily as a motor disorder. This is the pathologic hallmark that you see on a microscope, these abnormal accumulations of this in this type of preparation, pink stuff, the synuclein, in neurons that are affected by Parkinson's. And the hardest hit area in the brain is this area called substantia nigra, which in a normal brainstem looks like this dense area of pigmented cells, and in Parkinson's it looks like this. You see that this has degenerated and disappeared. One of the reasons we thought of it in these terms was that this was a straightforward aspect of the disease to study and to target with therapy. Dopamine, which we learned is the chemical most significantly affected there, has been used as therapy since the 1960s very successfully, and various formulations remain the hallmark of the disease. However, it is important that we have recognized and remembered that, as actually Parkinson himself had told us to some extent, Parkinson's is a disease of the entire body. Definitely the entire brain, not just the motor features of the affected substantia nigra, but as the disease progresses, it affects a number of central nervous system features, going all the way up to cognitive function in certain subtypes of the disease at a certain advanced stage. It also affects the entire body in a variety of ways. And these are just some examples. This is from a recent article in Nature Neuroscience, but some are not even captured here. It affects the skin, for example. There are changes in the skin and hair. Certainly affects the intestine and other autonomic functions. It affects the heart. It affects the bladder and gives people urinary troubles. It causes sexual dysfunction, causes pain, actually, of a variety of types. Definitely causes communication and speech problems. So Susan is definitely an expert in the swallowing part problems and the speech problems, and you'll hear more about that. And some interesting research is not only confirming this view of Parkinson's, but also helping us understand a little bit more about how the disease might come about. Some of these whole body manifestations, these manifestations in the periphery, precede the onset of what we think classically are the features of Parkinson's, like tremor, bradykinesia, rigidity. The cardiac problems and the hypotension, and most importantly, the constipation and the intestinal problems tend to precede the central nervous manifestation sometimes by decades. I will point out some very interesting research. This is a very techy and very busy slide, so I don't anticipate anyone to go over it. This is courtesy of Dr. Ted Dawson, who is a professor at Johns Hopkins and has done really pioneering research in this area. I will draw your attention to this portion of the slide. So we thought for a long time that it's possible that the disease starts in the gut and somehow spreads to the brain. So after many, many years of work, what his team were able to do was actually take the alpha-synuclein, which is the central abnormal protein in Parkinson's, and inject it into the gut of mice that were used to study the disease. And the abnormal protein appeared after being injected in the gut, appeared in the brain, and not just anywhere in the brain. It appeared in the brain in the areas where we normally see Parkinson's starting. And not only that, but in these animals, actually, it then reproduced the longitudinal loss of dopaminergic neurons in time and a few other features that we see in the brain of Parkinson's, in a way confirming that it is definitely possible for Parkinson's to start in the gut and somehow to spread to the brain. And this type of research, this is just one example of the way we look at features of the disease and try to learn from it and to learn how to approach it. And reverting again to the non-motor symptoms. So now that we know the disease very possibly can start in the periphery, it's also important to remember that non-motor symptoms are not just an additional feature of the disease, they actually predominate late in the disease in Parkinson's. There are still very limited treatment options for these, although more and more treatments are being developed. So the broad categories are mood disorders. Folks suffer from depression, apathy, anxiety. They can include cognitive impairment. Again, remember, this doesn't mean that every Parkinson case includes all of these. These are all possibilities. It can include psychosis, sleep disorders, including daytime sleepiness, fatigue, and autonomic dysfunction of a variety of types. And these are very prevalent symptoms, including constipation, excessive salivation, sexual dysfunction, drop of blood pressure. I would include here pain because we now know that pain is a part of Parkinson's as a non-motor symptom. In terms of treatment, we know we have the broad categories of pharmacologic treatment, which includes dopamine, either the actual dopamine, replacing the one that is lost in the brain, or formulations that will mimic its effect, and various non-dopaminergic medications, which can target both the motor and the non-motor features. Then we have surgical options, but we also have non-pharmacologic and other options. And we pay close attention to this after being somewhat stuck in our approach to treating Parkinson's with really the same therapies that we have developed in the 1960s. So the examples of current research, ongoing research, and some upcoming research will include primarily non-pharmacologic approaches. I'm going to start with exercise, and some of you may have heard my lecture on exercise in Parkinson's during our symposium. It's something I believe strongly in, and I always recommend to everybody. And it's a very exciting area of research, actually. It's now widely accepted that it benefits health in a number of ways, and specifically Parkinson's. And it does that through general health benefits, through specific effects of improving walking, balance, and general mobility. And very interestingly, it is possible that exercise actually can achieve disease modification or slowing the disease progression. And that is a very interesting and exciting area of research at the time. I have shown some of these before, just some highlights on the key studies that have shown some of these specific benefits. A study looking at Tai Chi showed a very significant increase in postural stability and a dramatic reduction in the number of falls in patients with Parkinson's as opposed to a control. Specific treadmill training has shown a significant and notable improvement in speed, as well as other measures of walking. And more comprehensive rehabilitation programs that included supervised exercise improved balance. And these effects have tended to actually last a long time. Now, this is, again, another techie and busy slide. No need to really pay attention to all the details here, but this summarizes a bit how exercise can help. So we know that high intensity exercise has been shown in various studies to change the structure of the brain and actually increase the thickness of relevant brain areas, to cause functional changes in the way that the brain activates during certain tasks in ways that have been shown to be towards the normal way that the brain functions versus the impaired way that some of the Parkinson changes can cause. And it also has caused cognitive connectivity changes, between brain regions. The brain works like a giant computer with various areas connected with each other, and in high intensity exercise seemed to have achieved some connectivity changes that were normalizing and improving the function of the brain in patients with Parkinson's. So that's why at the NIH, actually, we're funding several high profile studies. This is one of them that's already in progress that uses a cycling exercise. This is a stationary bike that patients are using in home. Interestingly, this is one of the studies that has been impacted less by the pandemic than a lot of our studies because the patients are already doing this at home. So this is another example how medicine has already adapted to some extent to the new environment we're functioning in. I'll talk a bit about this. And this is the clinicaltrials.gov identifier, if anybody is interested in seeing if they can participate. Another interesting study is SPARX, which uses high-intensity aerobic exercise. I've shown this graphic before, where the change in the UPDRS motor score has been graphed over 6 months. So in patients undergoing usual care, their motor score showing how their motor manifestations has changed in the expected range, about 4 points on the UPDRS, whereas the patients who are doing maximum heart rate exercise at 80 to 85% of the maximum heart rate actually showed a relatively stable course. Now, this was a phase 2 trial. It wasn't powered to show any conclusions on the efficacy of this. It just showed feasibility. However, based on these results, we are now funding a very large randomized multi-site trial, and this is the map of all the trial sites, all the US and a couple of Canadian sites. And this is an interesting study that's just about to start. This will be supervised endurance cardio training on treadmills. Again, this is one that is also adapting a little bit to doing this in the context of a pandemic. Another interesting study that I haven't mentioned before that is just getting started through our NeuroNext clinical trial network is a study of light therapy for non-motor Parkinson's symptoms. So again, a non-pharmacologic intervention for non-motor symptoms. Briefly, the circadian rhythm and the normal sleep-wake cycle is disrupted in Parkinson's. And this has both some downstream effect, and it's also a part of the manifestations of the disease biology. And preliminary studies have shown that bright light therapy, exposure to light in a systematic fashion, and increasing exposure to natural light or the spectrum of natural light can actually improve this and can have effects on the disease overall beyond just sleep and fatigue. But those are the main symptoms targeted, sleep and fatigue. This is what the device looks like. It's a screen that generates bright light. The study is called ENLITE-PD. And you can find information about this site, including recruitment or enrollment opportunities at the NeuroNext website. And very timely here, this is a study that was started before the COVID-19 pandemic, but has proven to be really timely because a lot of our work is actually turning to virtual remote assessments. And in fact, a lot of our studies have turned to this investigator team for the at-home PD study to learn from them and to try to gain some knowledge and to apply some of the methodology to adapting to the way we function, where we all have a lot more limited mobility, a lot less opportunity to visit in person. So what this study is a longitudinal observational study that happens entirely virtually, and it got the patients mainly from two large phase 3 study cohorts, the steady PD trial and short PD study, as well as an additional smaller study. And the patients were enrolled in this at-home PD approach, which includes virtual visits over the computer. It includes surveys that are provided by Fox Insight. This is something that was funded by the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which the patients fill out at home. And it also includes quarterly assessments on a mobile phone platform called Empower. And this is the distribution of where the subjects are coming from. So this is a very interesting study that is accelerating a bit our way into perhaps delivering our care and learning about our patients in an efficient virtual or remote setting. One other thing I will mention is that at the NIH and actually across a number of stakeholders, we are very interested in the fact that and very aware of the fact that our history of trying to achieve disease modification and reverting the course of the disease have really been unsuccessful. The latest large investment trials that have given us a negative answer include the Innocent trial, short PD, the Stradipine trial, steady PD, and the nilotinib study that really showed overall a negative result. We actually held a workshop at the end of 2019 where a very large number of participants from academia, from government, from industry, from nonprofits, we all got together to try to discuss honestly about what we need to change. And actually some recommendations are upcoming to try to guide the way we think about research here. So watch this space for some changes in the way the community of researchers overall is trying to approach this, so we can ultimately deliver for our patient community meaningful changes in the way we treat Parkinson's. And with that brief update, I will end, and we will be happy to take your questions in a little bit. And I think next we will turn to Susan. Jared, am I correct?
Thank you, Dr. Lungu. So now I'd like to introduce Susan Roenick, who will provide you with a brief overview of the PFNCA Communication Club program. Susan?
Thank you. Thank you, Jared. Good afternoon, everybody. It's always so exciting to be a part of the Kensington community and PFNCA. And Dr. Lungu never fails to deliver. I always learn something new when I have the privilege of sharing a program with him. As he emphasized, exercise is important. Exercise, exercise, exercise. Second to which I would say socialization. We know that it's important to stay active and stay involved. Not only physical movement for exercise, but also exercising your voice. The statistics show that the majority of people with Parkinson's disease experience issues with voice, with a softer voice, probably many more than we realize, and certainly many more with swallowing. But the startling, the staggering fact is that only 4% seek help. And the question would be, why is that? I suspect it's because people don't know that help is available. So I am an LSVT certified clinician. That means Lee Silverman Voice Training. We go by the initials LSVT. There are two forms. There's LSVT loud for speech and LSVT big for physical and occupational therapists, and that is for movement. Those are wonderful therapy programs. They are therapy. They do require a prescription, and they are one-to-one. It's a lot different than what we do. A lot of people aren't ready to make that commitment. So the good news, the time commitment. So the good news is that we have developed these communication programs, which enable you to come together and to practice virtually. And with the restrictions that COVID has placed on us, I'm delighted to say that we don't have to be limited. We can meet online, which is wonderful because you can come whenever you want. You don't have to look for parking, and it makes it very, very convenient. You can meet people from all over, which normally probably wouldn't be the case. You can meet people from all over the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. Now, I know that people frequently ask Dr. Lungu, what's the best exercise to do? And he didn't use this phrase, but I love it. He always says the one that you will do, the one that you enjoy. And so that's how I develop my group material. I try to change things up, do things differently. I want to emphasize that we call it exercise. It's not therapy. It's not tailored to the individual. It doesn't have specific goals with numerics. We don't have the accountability. We have fun for the common good to help you develop a healthy voice. Because if people can't hear you, they think you don't know. And we can't have that happening. And if people can't hear you, they don't socialize as much. And so we absolutely don't want that to happen. Now, especially when we can fix it. So the benefit of doing these vocal exercises in a group are that it can help you increase volume. It can help you improve your resonance. It can eliminate breathiness. It encourages vocal variety. Sometimes there's that flat effect in the face, but that can also come out in your voice. But when you work with the group, we help you develop that vocal variety. Sometimes you even develop the muscles in your face because I encourage smiling. Smiling is a free drug, okay? Releases serotonin, makes you feel good. So I encourage everybody to smile. In addition, because the muscles that are involved in swallowing and speech are the same, exercises like this might even have an impact on your swallowing. Above all else, we're doing it together as a group. So we're socializing, we're working with others, there's a team effort. Remember that if you're alone, you're always right, and that's a very dangerous position to be in. It's a good thing to come together in a group and to join forces, one for all and all for one. And because we work with a variety of materials and fun stuff, we also do a lot on brain health. So it's a win-win either way. The goal is to help you improve the quality of your voice and have fun while you're doing it. I am delighted that I have been asked to facilitate the group for the Kensington Rest-In. Our first meeting is going to be from 2 to 3 p.m. on August 4th. That's easy to remember, 2 to 3 p.m. on August 4th. This group is going forth under the generous sponsorship of the Kensington Rest-In. I'm delighted to be working with them and the Kensington Senior Living Communities. And of course, through the kindness and the generosity of the Parkinson's Foundation of the National Capital Area. So with that, I am Susan Ironic, as in Isn't It Ironic? And I hope I will have the pleasure of welcoming you on August 4th for our first communication club on behalf of the Kensington Rest-In. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Dr. Lungu. Before turning it over to Dr. Lungu and to Jared and Susan for questions, I just want to reiterate how thankful we are that each of you have joined us tonight, and also reiterate that the Kensington Reston is going to be opening in early 2021, and our information center in Reston is open. We would love to see you and hear from you, so please don't hesitate to reach out. The Q&A box is live, so feel free to type your questions in there and we will get them answered. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Can everyone hear me? I think we can start going over some of the questions now. So let me start with some of the questions that I'm seeing coming in. The first one I see is a question about magnesium threonate and whether it's beneficial for PD. I'm familiar with some preliminary studies and some lab work that showed some promise. I don't know yet how promising it will be and where it will go. It's one of the actually many potential pathways, potential approaches to treatment. So it's something that we can watch. To this moment, you know, it hasn't risen to the point where I would point to it as the most promising, but it's something that's under works. Not an area I'm particularly familiar with, so something that's good for all of us to keep an eye on the literature. Somebody asked, and I'm going to answer this because it's very timely, actually. Somebody asks about participation in a COVID mRNA trial. Would this exclude from participation, someone from participation in a Parkinson trial? I don't think so. Every trial has specific inclusion-exclusion criteria. I don't see why a COVID vaccine trial would exclude somebody from a Parkinson trial, but it really depends on specific requirements of each individual trial. The next question actually is important. So somebody asked why I think that the nilotinib was negative, and don't we think the Georgetown study was positive? I'll give you what is entirely my own opinion here. However, I would like to point to the fact that there is a lot of agreement for this position with a couple of dissenting voices, and I like to keep an open mind and listen to everybody's view on how this has played out. So there were two major studies, major phase 2 studies. One was the multi-center ENLITE-PD study sponsored by Michael J. Fox, and one was the one from the run at Georgetown University. And the results really seem to be quite similar, but it looks like how those results were interpreted has been very different. So the one that was published was out from Michael J. Fox. So the authors pointed out that it's safe, and I think everybody has agreed with this, but it doesn't really show the promise that everybody hoped it would show. Some folks refer to the Georgetown trial as positive, and it's one of those situations where you have to really think, what does positive mean? So it's positive in that one item that was picked on and folks pointed to was that, yes, it does penetrate into the cerebrospinal fluid. It does so at less than 1% of the amount of drug that was administered. So really, it's a matter of how do you define positive? Is the fact that less than 1% got in there, does that mean positive? The amount, then the concentration that is needed for it to actually affect the biological effect that has been shown to be necessary is way higher than that. So that's something that would question a little bit whether that's positive. In terms of changes in a positive direction, there were a couple of biomarkers, a couple of biological markers that moved potentially in an expected direction, although the range of that wasn't great. There is a lot of disagreement on what those mean. So at the moment, I can tell you that the majority of the Parkinson community really thinks that nilotinib is not really a promising therapeutic direction. And I subscribe to that view at this moment. Next question, how effective is TerraCycle for PD? I don't know exactly what TerraCycle is. Is this one of those stationary bikes? If it's one option for that, so any kind of cardio exercise is actually very very efficient potentially. How often do you recommend its use? Generally, based on what we know now, we think at least 3 to 4 times a week, at least 30 minutes. But as I mentioned before, the right amount of exercise is as much as you can do. There really doesn't seem to be a negative effect by doing too much. The only negative and the only limitation there is if you do too much to the point where you might injure yourself. So definitely you need to use common sense. Definitely don't try to go out running in heat index of 110 degrees in the middle of the day like we're having now. I may or may not be speaking from experience, so try to take my advice, but don't mimic what I do with exercise. So that kind of stuff would be potentially harmful if you do too much. But otherwise, do as much as you can and as often as you can. If you want to set a lower limit, I would say at least 3 times a week is a good thing to aim for, at least as a minimum. Next question, medications for off periods. So there are a number of medications. I think the latest medication approved may have actually been for off periods, and I'm trying to jog my memory because I'm blanking right now on the name. So there are a number of medications for off periods. There are also a number of new strategies actually. So there is a promising, there are promising effects seen actually with alternate administrations of dopamine, the sublingual formulation, and there are a number of strategies for minimizing the off periods. It's really a lecture in itself in terms of adjusting the medication, the dopaminergic medication, adjusting the COMT inhibitors, or using surgical therapies like DBS, which one of the main ways we judge its effectiveness is in reduction of off-period times. Has there been any new information on the role of diet and nutrition? Not really specifically for treatment of Parkinson's. There is a lot of information actually for diet and nutrition in general for beneficial effects, and there's a lot of literature on this. Some prominent articles have shown that things close to the Mediterranean diet approach tend to have long-term beneficial effects. But I wouldn't go for anything specifically for Parkinson's. Just try to look up what is healthy. Critically, I would consult with a dietitian, particularly if there are issues with food intake. A lot of our patients have difficulty with swallowing, they start losing weight, and at that point, it's important to get somebody who is a professional doing this for a living to advise you on that. Where do we get information about participation in an exercise trial? Actually, the same place you get information for participation in any trial. The first place I would look is clinicaltrials.gov. Not the most user-friendly, but it's a good platform. So if you go in and narrow by Parkinson and exercise and narrow by active or upcoming trials, you should get all the options that exist there. I can also share my slides from today and actually from the previous lecture where I talked about exercise in particular, because that has links to where those trials are if somebody is interested in participating. And related to this, any particular equipment, treadmill equipment that enhances progress, that's really a question that I would direct to one of our physical therapy colleagues. I always advise consulting with somebody, with a physiatrist or a physical therapist or a trainer. At my level, I just know that it's good to do, and I can share what I do. We're very limited about what I know, but for specific needs and for tailoring this, particularly for somebody who may have mobility impairment or any difficulty like that, please consult with a trainer or a physical therapist to make sure that your equipment fits you. Otherwise, in terms of the goals that you're trying to achieve, in terms of the intensity of exercise, any treadmill would work. I see. Somebody was kind enough to answer my question about what TerraCycle is. It's a stationary bike with a motor that moves your arms and legs. Yeah, so I don't know enough about it to comment specifically. So as long as you do a lot of the movement and you engage in cardio exercise, sounds fine. Beyond that, I would need to learn more about it because I'm not sure I understand how if it moves you, it would benefit. But this is just my lack of knowledge on this. A couple of folks wanted me to elaborate about the light therapy and the ENLITE-PD. So yes, I'll be happy to provide through PFNCA. I can send Jared some more information here. And if you go to neuralnext.org, this should be listed as one of their upcoming studies. And also Dr. Vidanovic, the principal investigator in that study, has a lot of other work that has been published. It's an interesting theory, and I have to confess, I only learned about this in the recent few years. It hasn't really been an active area of research before that. The biology and the underlying theory and research on this is actually fascinating. It does appear that patients with Parkinson's don't get enough exposure to light, to natural light. That's probably true for a lot of us. We spend a lot of our life indoors, but it seems to be particularly relevant in Parkinson's, and the exposure to light seems to have specific benefits. Again, particularly on sleep dysfunction, daytime sleepiness, insomnia, as well as fatigue. However, it appears that the benefits go a little bit beyond that, and they might affect other non-motor symptoms or even the motor manifestations. And what that study does is it gives the participants a light box for standard exposure to light. So it's actually, you just sit in front of the box, probably while doing something else, as long as the light hits the eyes at the right angle. And it actually comes with fairly elaborate instructions, comes with a set of instructions on how to set it up and how to have it expose you appropriately. Recommendations for off period, and somebody is mentioning apomorphine. Yes, apomorphine definitely is one of the medications that we use for off periods. In fact, it's also the injectable apomorphine is an old solution to extreme off periods where somebody can have freezing attacks, and those can be actually quite dangerous, and then apomorphine helps, and it's been around for quite a while. I'm getting a question about dietitians that specialize in PD that I'm aware of. So let me see if Susan or Jared have any offhand recommendations. If not, we might have to get back to you. Do you guys know?
I don't know of any that specialize in it. Susan, do you?
I work with Sarah Fisher, master's and a registered dietitian. She doesn't do exclusively Parkinson's, but she's quite knowledgeable.
Susan, can you share her email information with me, and then I can send it out to the group afterwards? Would that be okay? Thank you so much.
I shall. And I also have the name of a chef who caters to special needs. So I'll share both of those. Okay.
Thank you.
And the next question has to do with weight loss. So this is also very interesting. Are there reasons other than the swallowing difficulties? Yes, it appears to happen independent of swallowing difficulties. Definitely when and if swallowing difficulties happen, it gets worse, and they contribute to that. But it seems to happen independent of swallowing difficulties, and it can be a significant problem maintaining weight. And if somebody gets to that point, then we actually bring a dietitian into the team by referring the patient to a dietitian to try to consult and see how we can calorie supplement and how we can try to maintain weight. Very interestingly, one of the side effects of subthalamic nucleus deep brain stimulation appears to be weight gain. And it really appears to be a specific side effect to ST-NDBS that we don't quite understand. And in the majority of our patients, it can be a beneficial side effect. If they were losing weight abnormally, they can now start to gain. However, it can actually be extreme weight gain in some cases. So it's not something to rely on as a treatment. Somebody asked how they can register for the communication club.
So, Coder, and I can take that one. So when we've completed the Q&A portion, I'll explain exactly how to register for that program. So if you stand by for a few moments, I'll be addressing that in about 10 minutes. Thanks so much for the question.
Great. Somebody asked related to the light, if just going out and sitting in sunlight is helpful. We think that getting adequate sun exposure, yes, that would likely be helpful. However, please be aware of the potential harmful effect of intense sunlight. So please make sure that you wear sunscreen. Otherwise, yes, exposure to natural light is likely to be beneficial based on what we know. And we're also getting more questions about swallowing and speech issues and pathways to retention of capability. Susan, can you talk to that for a bit?
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
The question was a request for more information about swallowing and speech issues, and specifically some pathways to retention of capability. So probably delaying
All
the...
right. Oh, first of all, we'd have to identify what's wrong in order to determine how we're going to retain the capability that you have. I would recommend seeing a speech language pathologist. Probably the best path to that would be to go through your physician to get a script, to get a prescription, so that it would be covered by insurance. You can also contact me. I'll give you what information I can and direct you appropriately. And then after that, it's exercise, maybe some dietary textural changes, but we take it one step at a time. First, we have to determine what it is, and then we decide how we're going to fix it.
And Communication Club obviously is a great tool to help with that as well.
Absolutely.
Somebody asked the question, is Parkinson's hereditary? Oh boy, that's definitely a big area of research. So Parkinson's at the moment is understood as most likely a combination of hereditary factors and environmental factors that precipitate it. And the handle we have on both of those is still quite limited. There is no question that there are genetic predispositions. There are also well-known types of Parkinson's that are caused by genetic modifications, the so-called monogenic Parkinson's. That's a type that actually happens because somebody has a gene, and having the gene causes a disease, and that runs in families. The majority of cases do not fit that pattern. However, there is a role of genetics in Parkinson's. There is no doubt about it. And we're learning more and more about the contributors to the genetic risk of Parkinson's. It's a common question about how worried somebody should be if they have a relative with Parkinson's. So generally what we know about this, statistically speaking, having a first-degree relative, so parent or sibling or child having a first-degree relative with Parkinson's, theoretically, going just by statistics, raises somebody's risk of Parkinson, roughly doubling it. So this needs to be kept in context. The general population risk of Parkinson's is about 0.4%, I'm sorry. So this doubles that risk, still keeps it below 1%. So it doesn't mean that having a first-degree relative with Parkinson's makes you likely to get Parkinson's. Statistically, makes you more likely than somebody without any relatives, but it doesn't mean that somebody should start planning or thinking that that's a likely occurrence in their life. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Somebody asked if there's an effect of Parkinson's on the bones, specifically on existing osteoporosis. Very interesting question. Since osteoporosis is very common, it's actually been extremely hard to disentangle and to see if there's anything specific about Parkinson's. There's certainly some interplay between a number of factors, and there's also common risk factors, and we know that the obvious connections, like the fact that Parkinson raises the risk of falls, which raises the risk of fractures, particularly in the context of osteoporosis. Because all of these factors are so complex, I don't think that we know for sure if Parkinson's has a direct effect on the bones. However, awareness of bone health and bone density is particularly important in somebody like Parkinson's for obvious reasons. Related actually to the mechanisms, do we know why Parkinson starts? No, we don't. We don't know the incipient event, and that's really the million or more likely billion-dollar question. That's what we would like to know, because that would put us definitely quite a bit farther ahead on the pathway to actually curing it. Couple of questions about NIH specifically, folks who were in our genotype phenotype study, to clarify about that. So that is a research study, and the way the study works is if one of the known genetic mutations or factors that are relevant to somebody for Parkinson's are found, somebody would be contacted. So the NIH would contact you and tell you that. It looks like the person asking was there 4 years ago. So if you haven't heard anything, that means that they haven't found one of those known mutations associated with Parkinson's. What that study does is it looks throughout the genome for potential risk factors for Parkinson's. So the results there are only meaningful when pooled together with thousands and thousands of other samples. So unless one of the known mutations that can have a direct relevance on the patient is found, you wouldn't hear anything back about specific results for one individual participant. But as the results are published, we might all learn about additional risk factors for Parkinson's. And somebody asked about an NINDS email list. I would have to ask, because I don't know if we have an NINDS email list for upcoming events, but I might be wrong. I can ask our media folks who do this, but you're always welcome to check the NINDS webpage, ninds.nih.gov, and that lists a number of activities and studies, and actually has some links to where to find information about trials. Going back to folks asking about trials, the Michael J. Fox Foundation Fox Trial Finder is also a useful engine, because that actually allows you to input some information on what you're looking for, and it can show you relevant trials. And it looks like we're coming towards the end of all the questions that we had. So Jared, I think, shall we move on to the next
Absolutely.
step here?
Dr. Lunger, thank you so much, and Susan as well, for
Pleasure.
taking the time to answer so many questions in such a short time. We're so grateful. So before, in a few moments, I'll explain how to participate in the new PFNCA Communication Club program. But before I do that, I'm thrilled that we have a guest who's able to join us. Henry Wolf is a longtime participant in PFNCA wellness programs, and he has also participated in the PFNCA Communication Club for a long time as well. And so in a moment, as soon as we're able to get him on screen here, he's going to be for just a moment or two to share his thoughts on the importance of this program and kind of why hopefully you'll give it a try. So if our moderator can bring Henry on in a second, hopefully that would be great.
Henry, you should be ready to go.
Okay, anything I need to do here?
No, sir. You can just talk away.
Okay.
Henry, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. You want me to talk about the benefits of communications group?
That's right. And kind of, and that would be really wonderful, just for a moment or two.
Well, let me give you a little bit of my bona fides here. I've been a participant in the communications groups since about 2011, which is, I think, probably when they first started and the PFNCA. And my doctor first sent me to the Big and Loud program. And like all of the people who've gone through the Big and Loud program, for the first 2 weeks after you've left, you do the exercises and you maintain your voice, and then you skip a day, you don't do it, and you sort of regress to what your previous state was in terms of being big and loud. And I have found that the most effective way of reminding me at least once a week to do my exercises is to go to a communications group. You see that you're not alone in this situation, and that communications is really the key to maintaining your sociability in society. And if you want to make yourself heard, then you need to speak up. And Parkinson's patients need to speak up very, very clearly, because we've all been in this situation where there are 3 or 4 people gathered around doing, having a conversation, and you're trying to join in the conversation and you can't, because you can't be heard. And so that's one of the things, one of the major things that going to the communications club, communications group will allow you to do. And so I would encourage everybody out there who's a Parkinson's patient, whether you are having problems now with your voice, eventually you probably will. And one of the I think the benefits, side benefits, it's more than a side benefit, it's a vital thing, is that keeping a strong voice helps you keep your swallowing, the ability to swallow intact. And that, I think Susan probably can talk much more, but I can talk to it from the point of view of a participant, but Susan can give you the all of the whys and wherefores of that.
Yeah. Henry, I think that's great. I think right before you came on, Susan actually did give that overview. So personally, it's great to see you. We've spoken on the phone several times since COVID, but I haven't seen you. You're looking great, and your COVID's not slowing you down one bit. Doesn't seem that way. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts on the PFNCA Communication Club program. I'm going to just move on to the next part of our agenda, and I want to just let everyone know. Once again, that in order to participate in the PFNCA Communication Club program, you simply register for PFNCA Wellness Program for 2020 PFNCA Wellness Programs. And to do so, you would visit pfnca.org and select register. We're also going to post the link on the in the chat box in a moment. But and there's no cost for the programs, but we ask people to pay an annual $35 administrative fee for the calendar year. This fee can be waived for financial hardship. Once you register and pay your annual administrative fee, you have access to about 30 exercise and communication club classes each week, including this new PFNCA Communication Club that's being made possible with the support of the Kensington Resident. So, and I'm really thrilled that if you're not currently registered for PFNCA's 2020 Wellness Program year, and if you'd like to participate in the new PFNCA Communication Club that the Kensington Resident is hosting, excuse me, the Kensington Resident will pay for your annual administrative fee for 2020. So this kind offer is for one person per household. So since you register per person, if it was for you and a spouse, it would just be for the person who is with Parkinson's. But to take advantage of this offer, you would use the link that Angela is going to put in the chat box. And then when you check out, you use the code TKRESTIN, all one word, when the system asks for it. And that's how you would get your $35 discount to participate in this program. But this concludes our program today. And I should also say that we'll send you the information by email as well. So if you can't pull it off the chat box, you can pull it off the email. But I did also want to mention that in the chat box, I put the name of the dietitian that Susan recommends. So you can pull it from the chat box there. And we'll also send that to you by email as a follow-up. So in the email we send you, you'll get the name of the dietitian, and you'll get the information and link as to how to register for PFNCA wellness programs, including how to participate in the new PFNCA Communication Club. Remember, you're signing up for all of our programs. Think of it as your library card for PFNCA. You're not registering for one class, you're getting a card for the whole year to go to as many classes as you want. We've got some people that do 5 or 7 classes a week, you know, and so I encourage you to use it as much as you'd like. Try different classes, try different instructors, but you really want to try this new one with Susan Ronick. It starts on August 4th with the Kensington Reston. So again, this concludes our program today. I want to thank Dr. Lungu, who actually had to sign off for another meeting. Susan, thank you so much to Susan Ronick. Henry Wolf, thank you so much for joining us and being part of this and sharing your thoughts. And I absolutely want to thank Angela Bailey and our friends at the Kensington Reston for being involved with this program today and making it possible, but also for underwriting the costs of our new PFNCA Communication Club, which starts August 4th. So thank you, and thank you to all of you for joining us. I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.